downtime, we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. I know that it's an early morning and an even earlier morning for our visitors who drove from far away. So thank you all for making that trek here to Atlanta, especially given the weather it looks like we're about to have. This is our third meeting of the Study Committee on County Governance, and we are going to be talking about kind of how county governments interact with groups like MARTA, CIDs, the chambers, and how we can most efficiently, or how county governments can most efficiently work with these groups to make sure that their constituents are being properly served and business development is going well, et cetera, et cetera. Today we are going to hear first from the General Manager and CEO, Jeffrey Parker, or General Manager and CEO of MARTA, Jeffrey Parker, who's been doing an outstanding job. I had the pleasure of sitting on the committee that oversees MARTA, called MARTOC, and I've seen now both two CEOs, and both of them have done a wonderful job, and I look forward to seeing MARTA just continue to grow and move on up.
All right, well, thank you, and thanks for inviting me. I'm going to spend time sort of laying out how both in an official capacity MARTA interacts with the counties that it serves, and then I think it's worthwhile sort of talking about how that interaction happens on a more day-to-day basis and things get done routinely. So as I think most people know, but it's worthwhile repeating. MARTA serves 4 jurisdictions, Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton counties, as well as the city of Atlanta. And our board is made up of appointees, mostly appointees from the county level, although, for example, Fulton County appoints one of the 3 representatives, the mayors of North Fulton are the ones who appoint the other 3, and here in DeKalb County where we sit, the 3 of the 4 are appointed by the county, and the 4th is appointed by the mayors of the district, and then Clayton County, all of those members are appointed by the county. So the board that oversees MARTA and was the person or the body that hired me and that I work for is largely made up of representatives of appointees of the county government. So that is really one of the direct ties that we have. On the other side, we have what we call a rapid transit agreement that we entered into with our jurisdictions, so both the counties, the 3 counties that we serve, as well as the city of Atlanta. And that contract, that rapid transit assistance agreement, is basically the intergovernmental agreement that we have between MARTA as an entity and its jurisdictions that in a nutshell says that we are the providers of transit service within those jurisdictions, and that on behalf of MARTA and through the state code, that the counties collect the 1 cent sales tax, and that money funds the operation. So clearly, that rapid transit agreement is critical to our operation, and we are now working on a 15th amendment of the rapid transit agreement, and working with the counties to make sure that ultimately both the counties as well as the 3 counties that we serve, as well as the city council, approves that rapid transit agreement. And that's critical for our long-term survival in terms of being able to bond. Right now, I believe we're just shy of 30 years, so we're looking to extend that rapid transit agreement an additional 10 years, so that we can continue to serve the constituents that live in the counties that we serve. As part of that rapid transit agreement, we've agreed to provide periodic updates generally on a quarterly basis. It varies county by county. And so in fact, tomorrow I'll be meeting with this City of Atlanta's Transportation Committee. I believe next week I'll be meeting with the DeKalb County Commission, and we make formal presentations to the county government about the status of our service, what is our priorities, listening to them in terms of what needs they have, what they're hearing from their constituencies. So that's sort of the broad stroke in terms of that formal both relationship that we have through our board, through the rapid transit agreement, through the formal presentations that we provide county governments in terms of how we serve them. But then there's a lot of other conversations that need to happen on a continuous basis. And if you think about, for example, the board of directors last week approved a project list for the City of Atlanta. And this would, although, here we're talking about a city government, but the relationship is really the same when it comes to implementing projects. Through the transit governance bill that was passed, Fulton County is contemplating a referendum to raise some money for some additional transit service in Fulton County. DeKalb County is undertaking a transit plan right now, and ultimately the county commission would be the ones who decide to call a vote, similar to what's going on in Gwinnett County right now with a plan with a referendum in March. So in terms of expanding MARTA service, whether it's within the City of Atlanta, in Gwinnett County, the potential in Fulton or DeKalb, the work that we're planning on doing in Clayton County related to when they joined the MARTA district. Clearly, the county government has the ability to move forward a referendum and allow the voters to decide whether or not to invest in transit. But when we talk about implementing projects, there are many aspects of that project that we've got to work collaboratively with that government. So I'm going to talk about the City of Atlanta as an example, but I think that would apply to Gwinnett County, assuming they pass the vote, or Fulton County if they decide to have a referendum, which I would expect. But for example, things like eminent domain. MARTA does not have the ability to take property. I think we all recognize that in order to build a transportation network, there's many times an eminent domain is critical to the success of a project. So MARTA has to work with its jurisdictions around implementing, eminent domain in order to build the transportation project. Zoning is another issue in unincorporated parts of the counties that we serve or within a city limit. If we're going to build a transportation expansion project or maybe a transit-oriented development project, we've got to make sure that the zoning in that jurisdiction fits the needs for that transportation project. So MARTA and MARTA staff have to work collaboratively with either a county or a city government to make sure that we get that right. I think clearly both county and city government are critical to helping MARTA understand the needs of the citizens that we serve. When you look at the referendum that was passed by the City of Atlanta, the project list that was just approved, city government, the city council members were just critical to the success of defining what was important and helping us reach out to the constituents that we serve and get a perspective of what were important projects. If we look over to DeKalb County right now, DeKalb County, along with the ARC, is undertaking a transit study to look at what DeKalb County's vision for the long-term investment in transit should be in DeKalb County. Critically important to MARTA implementing any sort of expansion of transit services, whether it's improvements in South DeKalb County, or whether it's extensions of the Clifton corridor, or dealing with congestion along Buford Highway. We've got to work collaboratively and help rely on the help of county government to really understand what the needs of the constituents that live in DeKalb County. So I think that relationship, both at a formal level with our rapid transit agreement and an informal level to just understand the needs of the community, is sort of critical to that long-term success of MARTA. And largely, it's important for myself to be the face of that interaction many times with county government. So that's a high level kind of summary of how we work together, and how we make sure that ultimately that MARTA is serving the constituencies that are largely represented by both county and city government in the jurisdictions that we serve. Hopefully that was helpful to your question.
Well, I have a couple of questions, as I'm sure you
Fine.
would imagine. For Clayton and DeKalb, is it correct to assume that it's the county commission that would approve any sort of contract, intergovernmental contract, or project, or whatever was going on in their relationship with MARTA? Is that who would have kind of the final say?
Well, there's a couple things. So when we talk about the rapid transit agreement, that there is I believe statute that requires that, so that's statutory.
Right.
That agreement has to be approved at the county, and in the case of the city, at the city level. But there's been, within MARTA, there's been this sort of evolution of how, to what extent control is probably not the right word, but sort of how the level of influence has happened related to expansion projects. So if we think about the three jurisdictions, when that being the third, which is, as we know, has not entered the MARTA district, but is contemplating it, we've had this evolution of the relationship around setting the priorities for projects and how they develop. And I see that evolution continuing. So the first county that joined MARTA district, since the historical creation of MARTA, was Clayton County. And when Clayton County joined the MARTA district, there was a decision that was made to set aside a half of the sales tax that's being collected in order to invest in some specific projects. So there was this, as part of the vote, MARTA made the promise, and that became part of our rapid transit agreement, to invest in high-capacity rail transit for advancing those projects. The next evolution, as I see it, was that the city of Atlanta, when the voters voted to raise the half-cent sales tax, there was an IGA that was established between MARTA and the city of Atlanta about how the prioritization of those projects would be set, what role the city council would have, what role the mayor would have, what role the board of directors would have. So a clear-cut process that we followed, which is really different than the historical approach to MARTA, that the rapid transit agreement for the 1 cent sales tax that we collect to date is largely an agreement that says the counties are part of a MARTA district, and that 1 cent sales tax goes into a pool of money, and MARTA, under the board policy and staff making, recommendations, sort of does what it believes is in the best interest of the MARTA system as a whole. So these were the first two steps in terms of segregating money and giving really some direct control through intergovernmental agreements to shape projects. And I think that's, you know, I say that not to be critical, because I truly believe that, you know, we're in a day and age of transparency, and I think that it's important that the city council and the mayor have a clear-cut process, and people can point to that and understand, and that MARTA isn't just planning this program, and either the perception of MARTA planning a program in a vacuum would not be healthy to, you know, other jurisdictions wanting to invest in MARTA. So now we have Gwinnett County, and you know, and we've sort of taken that to another step. So Gwinnett County, through the Transit Governance Bill, was given a sort of a new path to enter the MARTA district. And what was decided between the approval of the board and the Gwinnett Commission was that we will agree, and we have a signed contract now that's pending a successful vote, and we do have an executed contract now. And what that says is the money that's collected in Gwinnett will be set aside for the benefit of Gwinnett. But what it also does is that the money that's being collected in Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, and the city of Atlanta is separate from that money for Gwinnett. So Gwinnett is really self-funding the operation and the expansion of the transit service. Now, they've agreed to pay their fair share for the system, and they've agreed that a project that, for example, you know, at the end of this line, at the end of this line out of Doraville, Gwinnett County buses come into Doraville Station. As that bus network grows, the capacity of that bus facility is going to need to be expanded, and they've agreed in that agreement that, you know, that through mutual agreement between the county and MARTA, that they may be investing in improvements in DeKalb County. So we've really taken this next step of segmenting that money. And I would expect that when Fulton County or when DeKalb County raises the sales tax, that county government is going to want to have local control over how that investment is made. So
I appreciate the history and evolution. That was very detailed. But more on the 30,000 foot view level, who approves at the end of the day, you know, whatever the contract or the issue is, when it comes to, Clayton County and Fulton County, they're obviously run by a county commission. Mm-hmm. But then we have DeKalb, who is the CEO and the county commission. And then, of course, we have the city of Mayor, which we're just not really going to talk about right now. So for Clayton County and Fulton County, is it just the county commission that approves these things? And then for DeKalb County, is it the county commission who has exclusive ability to approve these, or does the CEO have to sign
So in
off?
terms of the contracts that we have, it is through the county commission is the one who approves the contract.
And that's the same with DeKalb as well?
Yes.
So the CEO does not have like veto ability, for example?
No. The one sort of nuance there is appointment of a board member in Fulton and Clayton for those members that are appointed by the county. The county commission approves the board member. In the case of DeKalb County, the CEO nominates a board member, and the commission would approve that person. So that's the one nuance there.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that? What would prohibit the county commission in a DeKalb, for example, from changing that policy? MARTA would have no say-so since it's a local decision.
I'm not a lawyer. I would assume that that's the case. I think you're right.
Because MARTA could not dictate to how you select. To a local
Yeah,
level.
and I don't see why, a rapid transit agreement doesn't spell out how board members are appointed. That's really a local although it's, you know, it's also shaped by the MARTA Act. So the fact that, for example, Fulton County, the fact that there's one member of the Fulton County MARTA board that's appointed by the county and 2 members appointed by the mayor, that's a MARTA Act issue, that's not a Fulton County issue. So the fact that in DeKalb County.
But what I'm talking about would have nothing to do with the city of Atlanta.
Yeah,
This is one government.
yes, I believe you're correct.
So when MARTA works with, like, I guess Fulton County or DeKalb County or Clayton County on unincorporated areas for zoning and stuff like that, at a staff level, who does that discussion start with? And then how does it, is that something else that y'all have kind of a prescriptive, this is how you work your way up to whoever approves it?
Yeah, you know, it's, you know, depending on the project, you know, a TOD, which is probably where zoning comes into the biggest play, our TOD department, transit oriented development, I apologize. So we would work with county staff in the planning department to really, you know, talk about how we would want to, you know, what's the right decisions. Like, for an example of this is, we have a grant that was, so a grant that actually predates the formation of the city of Stonecrest. So we were working with DeKalb County when it was unincorporated DeKalb County. We got a grant from the FTA, provided a local match, and this was about laying out a footprint for what sort of best practices would be at a you know, a zoning and development level in order to develop the corridor that would go out to Stonecrest. So we were working collaboratively with you know, the planning department within DeKalb County, and now we're working collaboratively with you know, the city as well as the county around that.
I'd like to follow up on that, please. You mentioned 2 things earlier about the eminent domain and the zoning issues, and I'm going to go from A to B, just for point of clarification in my mind. If you wanted to eminent domain or rezone within the city of Atlanta, you currently have to have the permission of the county commission.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
We would do that with the city.
Okay. So if you went into an unincorporated area of DeKalb that became incorporated, is it your belief then, unless the vote was taken prior to, is it your belief then that you have to go to the incorporated area for zoning or eminent domain and not the county? Just because that's what you do in another place? Is your bylaws, or how does that work?
It's really, I mean, I don't believe it's really our bylaws. It's really about who's got the ability to implement the zoning or eminent domain in that case, and who's the, you know, who's the appropriate party. And we're going to want to work collaboratively with both a, you know, a city and a county and try and, you know, attempt to make, you know, meet the needs of both those jurisdictions.
And how does that decision affect the overall priority list of the projects? In other words, if there's a hurdle that might be a little higher
Yeah.
because we don't know with that if we can get this done, does that mean we might actually look down the list a little further on the priority just to avoid? It was item number 3.
No.
Now we're going to move to item number
No.
6.
Yeah, you know, I mean, things like, you know, for example, let's take the Clifton Corridor, for example. It's a project that's both in the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County, right? That, you know, many pieces of it are in.
I don't want to take a current thing.
Okay.
I'm
all
saying
right.
going in the future.
Yep.
you've got an unincorporated area, and you're looking at potentially eminent domain to put
Yeah.
something there, that lift may be a little bit higher, a little harder, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
Okay? Does the MARTA board then decide, not necessarily because of that, but would it be within the rights of MARTA to say, even though that previously may have been a project number 5, do you have a project list?
We do.
Okay. So if you had a project list and this was long-term, we're thinking this is
Yeah.
number 7, but because the new developments for zoning within a new incorporated area, for example, maybe we won't do number 7 anymore because that lift could be a little harder.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pragmatic and that can happen. Does MARTA have the wherewithal to be able to say, we're going to then skip number 7 and go to number 10?
See, I would,
And then I'm going to tie that to a referendum if the people thought they were going to do
yeah,
number 7.
so the premise that you're laying out almost suggests that this decision-making process is done really quickly, and the reality.
I understand that. I just
Right.
don't want the people to vote on
Yeah.
a referendum, which you referenced
Right,
earlier.
right.
Because they think they're getting this, and then you got into a local situation that may
Right.
prohibit that, and I just didn't know how that
Yeah.
worked within y'all's, to be
Yeah, so-
transparent.
Yeah, we would want to create a process, but the reality is we're going to set a priority list of projects. And that may be in a referendum, explicitly laid out, and then we've got a responsibility to deliver that because the people voted for projects A, B, and C, right? Well, it may be 6 years down the road before we're dealing with an eminent domain issue.
Right.
And, and so then we're gonna have to, if we can't execute that eminent domain because of some local opposition or whatever, we're gonna have to work around that to be.
And I just don't know from a legal
Yeah.
point, are you obligated if you get into an eminent domain to maintain your priority list? I know a lot of times those are written as broad as possible to give you as
Yeah.
much wiggle room and not necessarily meet some of those projects.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest, we're, in the case of a referendum that, we have not had a referendum yet that spells out exactly the limitations of projects 1, 2, and 3. Like for the city of Atlanta, the referendum was an $11 billion project list with $2.7 billion worth of funding. So there's a lot of, prioritization that will be happening over a, 20-year period to shape that
A lot of wiggle room.
project. Yes.
Yeah, one specific question, one 30,000-foot question, by the way, thank you for being
Yeah,
here.
thanks for having me.
Enjoyed hearing about what you do. Eminent domain, GDOT has a different way of handling that
Right.
than, say, would any county or city government,
Mhm.
because we expect Georgia Department of Transportation to build a road over a long distance and
Right.
maybe travel from several
Yep.
jurisdictions. MARTA is fastly becoming multi-jurisdictional, more so than it is now. Something you may want to think about is some kind of partnership with GDOT in that area that will allow you to make these plans like Chairman Reinders is talking about.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of other examples in the law where an entity can select Plan A or Plan B as far as which government they go to for some of the services that they need, such as we discussed.
Yeah.
Just an idea for you. Here's the big picture. Compare and contrast to the extent that you think there is any difference. You're working with Fulton County versus DeKalb County.
Just to clarify, in order of how we execute that,
How's it work?
yeah, I
Are
think
there
it's.
idiosyncrasies between the two governments that are?
Well, I mean, the clear and obvious, difference is the CEO position. And, my approach is a practical one. The form of government in DeKalb County is different than the form of government in Fulton County. So, for example, I interact a lot with the CEO. I interact a lot with Commissioner Rader and do those things, sometimes the two of them together, sometimes the two of them separate. when I present to DeKalb County formally, it's in front of the commission. The CBO, since I've been doing this, the CBO is not independent of those meetings. But in Fulton County, when I'm working on an issue like the project managed, BRT and the managed lane sub 400, I'm largely working directly with the two commissioners who represent that area. Commissioners Ellis and Hausman, because they're passionate about that. So I think that, from my perspective, I need to work with people who are focused on my issues and want to, be collaborative or hold me, accountable for something they don't like me doing in it. And just the form of government's a little bit different, but, I need to work collaboratively.
This problem of having to work with two different entities, like you said in the cab, we've experienced. Sometimes we think things would run much smoother at the State House if we didn't have to work with the Senate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's all the questions we have for you,
All right.
Mr. Chairman. So
Well, thank you.
thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Before I introduce our next speaker, I am remiss in announcing or introducing, I guess, my colleagues who are here, Chairman Ed Reinders and, of course, Chairman Barry Fleming. Both drove in long ways to be here, so appreciate you all. Someone else who drove a long ways to be here, Mr. Matt Schlachter. Am I saying that? Schlachter? Okay, trying. From Columbia County. He's the Deputy County Administrator. And you have a sheet that we will be working off of today. So if you'd like to go ahead and start.
Yes, sir. We were asked to kind of talk about how we go about procuring goods, contract services. To give you here a rundown of, like I said, a 30,000-foot look at our different ways of going about that. If you go to the purchasing thresholds, that basically lays it all out. If we're purchasing something under $2,000, we're allowed to do that without any quotes. We go by $2,000 to $20,000, we require written quotes, and then above the $20,000, we are required to go out to bid unless we are following the state law for public works, and we go up to the $100,000. We have found that joining these cooperative purchasing agencies has given us the ability to pull quotes that have already been bid out without having to go through the process ourselves. So it really speeds up our acquisition. We have the ones that we were members of. Once we get above that, we go to the formal solicitations. We do publicize those in our local organ. We identify the criteria in which they will be evaluated early on so that everybody knows the playing field. We do provide any of that as part of the Open Records Act. If you're looking for how we did it, why we did it, or our evaluations were, it's all out there to be seen. We do require contract approval by the commission if we're doing anything above the $20,000, unless it's the quotes for public works. Professional services, we do allow staff to negotiate directly with a single source versus going out for bids if you're looking for something specialized. If you're looking for an engineer that has great qualifications in building a park, you want to go directly to that, we can do that without having to go through the formal bid process. Sole source, we do have a traffic network. One engineering firm designed the system. We know we have to buy from them for everything we do, so we're allowed to buy directly sole source if we have that need or that want. And of course, when the governor declares an emergency, we're allowed to buy with bypassing every bit of that. So that's the 30,000-foot look. I think some of the key points that we have found is we have quit using store accounts. That was major for us to quit doing that. We went to purchasing cars.
Quit using what, Matt? I'm sorry.
Store accounts.
Store accounts. Okay, when it's Home Depot, you have an account, you go get your check.
We found that if you have that Lowe's or Home Depot store account, that store account goes across the country, not just the store you're at. And we've bought gas grills from people in Florida and have no idea why we did that, but we've done it. Because somebody walked in and said, I'm with Columbia County.
Wow.
And in Columbia County, Florida, it got billed in Columbia County, Georgia. So we did away with store accounts, with straight purchase cards, which we also get a rebate from our bank when we do purchase.
How's the decision making on who gets a purchasing card? We've had some issues at the state level.
Right. So our government is broken into divisions. There's a director that runs each division. Below him are department managers. We delegate that down to our division directors. You decide who you want to have. Most of them then delegate it down to their department managers. When we first started, it was for our maintenance facility maintenance folks. Those guys are running around all day, every day fixing things. They all had cards. We realized they were buying stuff in bulk while they were out. If they needed a sprinkler repair, they needed a half-inch union. Well, they bought a 10-pack instead of a single one. Because, well, I'm here, I'll need one again, let me just go ahead and buy it now. We found that we were having a lot of problems with people buying more than they needed, so we kind of pulled those back, and so now in that department, just the manager. So when you want to go buy something, you call the manager and say, can I have your card? Here's what I'm buying. Other departments, we put them in their pockets because they are traveling.
And is it your job to audit each one of those?
Every
Y'all
single
actually
one.
have a process in place that you must review those every 90 days, 60 days?
Every week.
Every week? Okay.
Every week. So
Okay.
when you come back with that receipt that you purchased something, you have to put your line code of where it went and why it went there. That gets put in by the admin into our system, our Munis system. Munis is our operating system. That then goes to the manager. He has to look at it and approve it. After it leaves that manager, it goes to the director. The director has to sign off and it gets paid. I have 4 directors that I have to review their cards. And I also have the facility maintenance department. Every single one of their cards comes directly to me because they are purchasing a lot of goods. We found the P cards was definitely a lot better for us to monitor how we were spending our money. That's the 30,000. How detailed do y'all want to get into that? I'll let you ask the questions.
So I'm mostly interested, I mean, the fact that the purchasing card is working for y'all is very interesting to me because we have had so many issues in the past, I mean, particularly the past 8 years, for example. And I mean, do you think it's because of the system that you have where everybody's looking at it once a week and then there's this whole checkoff system and, you know, there's not really room for any, suspicious activity, if you will?
Understand. There's still parts of it that we see gaps in. Sometimes you won't get that itemized receipt. You get that one that says I purchased $342 from Home Depot. It doesn't tell you what you bought. And Home Depot's a bad example because they always list, but some places give you that credit card receipt that says sign here, here's what you spent. If you don't have that backup behind that says what that money went to, those are tough. I don't know what the guy's buying. He could be buying a gas grill for his family. I don't know. We've really cracked down on our folks. If you don't bring us some sort of itemized detail of what you bought, don't bring us that receipt. The problem with that is that money's already been spent.
Right.
Whether he brings that receipt or not, that money's gone. Lowe's had it. It's hard for us.
But it does, if they know that you're going to ask that, it does help eliminate in the
That's right.
future.
That's right. Exactly right.
And do they tell you beforehand, kind of, this is what I'm going to buy, this is how much I expect it to be? Or do you say, or does the manager say, listen, you have a cap of $50, or?
We set limits on the card. We can do it daily, so we can set your limit at $50. So that if you are out and about, you have to have something, you have that right. But if you need to go up to 100, 200, whatever, you call your manager. I need to buy this. Here's what it's going to cost. That manager then has to email his director and say, I want to change the limit on so-and-so's card. That manager then has to call procurement. Or the director then calls procurement and says, I'd like this person's card. It takes several people to make that change. One person can't do it. And that you can do it, stay on the phone, already made the purchase, all right, drop this limit right back. So it can be done instantaneously. That's really helped.
Do you have a software system that lets you know that you actually key in so you can see whether you're seeing a spike in purchases or not? And I use that because I read something about the matrix of, hypothetically, Walmart knows that they've got a 2.2% theft rate. It's not until they see the 2.7 that they said then they go, someone is systematically or we've got a lapse somewhere. Do y'all have that kind of internal as well? Because you can see $120 a month in this department. Next year, if it was $180, that may be small potato in your minds, but it's a 50% increase in a year.
Right. No, sir, I've not got that level. I'm not saying our software's not capable.
Yeah.
I just know that I haven't done it. I haven't dove into it that well. That's a great point to see if we do have an ability.
Do y'all think, I mean, have you seen, does anything get slowed down because you do have to make the calls, or, you know, we're gonna drop the P card back down to $50 or whatever? I mean, is it kind of cost benefit analysis, is it worth doing that versus, okay.
I think it's worth every minute you spend. If I can spend 5 minutes making a phone call and save us $1,000, it's worth my 5 minutes.
Right.
I can do it, you know, in a meeting, if you text it to me, I can review it, I can send a text to your, I don't have to actually talk to you, as long as we have a record that that call was made or that email was made. So I think it's worth every minute.
Let's talk about bidding and kind of the contracts and entering into contracts and really the transparency aspect of that. I know you all have, like you said, the cooperative purchasing and how that helps things, but let's go through kind of formal solicitations and how that works in a little bit more detail for you all for that.
So the cooperative purchasing, that's basically when we're buying goods, tangible items. As a side note, before we ever make a purchase off of a joint purchasing agreement, we also check with local vendors that are not part of that agreement to see that we're getting the best price. So if we're buying a pickup truck, we can get one off a state contract for $23,000. We'll call our local Ford dealership and say, what's the price for this truck? If he says it's 22, then we'll stop what we're doing, we'll put it out to bid, and we know we get a better price. So for the formal bid process, we do have a software that we use for bidding out our items, construction projects, water lines, roads, sidewalks. We do advertise on our legal organ. We do advertise for 4 weeks. So we are putting it out there in the Columbia News Times. We are putting it out on our website. We are using BidSync software, which has a database that you can, when you register as a vendor, I sell widgets. I want to be notified anytime you buy a widget. When we put that bid into BidSync, it sends that email blast out to everybody that's ever asked for selling widgets. When those do come back in, if it's a straight bid, procurement does evaluate to make sure all requirements were met, bid bonds were included, insurance. They did answer all questions. They did provide us a price on everything. They evaluate that. That evaluation sheet goes into a recommendation from staff to committee. They review it, and from committee it goes to commission. Commission gives full approval. So it's a lot of checks and balances in there.
So tell me about the legal ads. How detailed are they? Is it enough to like give somebody a, you know, heads up, like we're actually looking for the truck that you were talking about, you know, give us your best price by such and such a date, or is it like we're generally looking for, you know, vehicles in the area, you know?
Right, it'll say for a truck, we're looking to purchase 17 half-ton pickups. Bids are due on this date. Last day for questions is this date, 3 days prior. A mandatory or non-mandatory pre-bid meeting will be held at this date at this location. So we try to give them the basics. We don't go into the details. If you want the details, come see us.
Matt, in Columbia County, it's a county of about 150,000, 160,000 people, right? It's you have a countywide elected chairman of a 5-member board, and then you have a county manager, and then I think you have different committees that oversee these different areas, and that committee has a chairman,
Correct.
one of the commissioners, right?
Correct.
So, and you can I guess we could use the topic here, procurement. How much interaction do the staff have with the chairman of the commission, the chairman of the committee, versus the manager? I'm really getting at who runs it, who makes the decisions.
So our county administrator, he does not get involved in the day-to-day business of the procurement department. So when they bring the agenda item and place it on the committee, that's usually when he's.
What committee oversees this?
That'll be our management and internal services committee.
Okay.
So that's internal services, our procurement, our finance, our technology side of the house. They handle all that. So the director, Leanne Reese, is the director of our internal services, oversees procurement. procurement basically reports to her how the bid process went, it gives a recommendation, she prepares an agenda item, she places it on the agenda. Then that's usually when Scott, the two deputy administrators, we start seeing the information, we start reviewing it then. That's right. So we start reviewing that a week prior to hitting committee. The county clerk sends out the agenda, has every item listed on it, has all the backup. So for a week prior to committee ever hearing it, we start looking at it, we start asking questions. If there's issues that we need to discuss, that's when we go to the chairman of the committee and start talking about, here's what's coming to you, and here's why
A
it's
problem
coming.
or something different.
Correct. Anything out of the norm, any kind of a contested bid.
How often does the questions go the other way if you get a call from the chairman of the committee, for example?
It depends on the committee. Certain chairmen call and ask questions about every single agenda item. And it's more of a, I've read it, I understand it, let me make sure I get what you're trying to tell me.
Right.
Other committees, they wait until they get you in front of the committee, in front of the public, and they ask you the questions there. They want you to answer in front of everybody. So it depends on the committee.
What about the chairman of the county himself?
He's heavily involved with us. He asks a lot of questions.
Okay.
He asks me, I'd say weekly, how my bid process is going for our big construction projects. We're doing a lot of parks, we're doing a lot of road projects. Weekly, he's asking me, where do we stand on this? When's it going out? When's it coming back? He is definitely involved in it.
Do you ever have conflicts from your standpoint between your manager, your committee chair, and your county chair? Do you ever have different directions?
Well, we're dealing with humans, so yes, there's always some conflict. And it's usually about a speed of things. Maybe the chairman, the county chairman wants to happen faster. Skip committee, bring it straight to commission. Let's get this going. We need to get this project underway. Whereas the chairman of the committee wants it to come through his committee. Obviously, he wants to hear what's going on. As far as differences in how we do the process, very rare that they ever differ on how we do the process as far as the bid process.
Thank you.
At what point at what point of, I guess, the negotiations or the, procurement process can the public become informed? I mean, obviously, at some point, things need to stay behind closed doors because, they're either receiving bids, reviewing bids, and nobody needs to know what the other person's bidding. But at what point is the public able to know what's going on?
If we do pre-bid meetings, those are open to the public. We hold them in a conference room, an auditorium, depending on the project. We've had them in our commission chambers before because we expect the large crowds to come in and hear about it. So I would say that the minute we advertise, the public can be involved in it. Now, once the bids are open to the public also, so that's not public. Nobody ever comes, but you can. At committee, when the bids are presented to committee for recommendation to the commission, public gets involved there. But again, it's very rare that the public ever gets involved in them because they don't show up to talk about a bid process.
And then I had another quick question. Speaking of conflicts, like he was talking about, but a little bit off on that. What happens, or does anything happen if so-and-so commissioner's brother-in-law is bidding on a special project? Are they conflicted out, or is it just kind of like y'all need to consider this, or?
They will actually make it known themselves. They will stand up and say, I cannot vote on this. This is why. I even have that conflict. My family owns a construction company in the county. If they ever bid, I'll walk away. I won't get involved in it. I won't go to the bid opening. I won't make a recommendation to commission. Matter of fact, right now in committee, I had to turn over an item that a company bid on that's owned by me. A project was bid on by my family business. I don't own it. I have nothing to do with it. I'm just related to the owners. I gave it to the administrator. The deputy administrator said, I have to give you this to you. And we make it very well known that why we're doing it. There's a conflict. Here's why I can't do this.
Is that a requirement by the county, or is that just something,
It's a requirement. It's actually in our code of ordinances that you must recluse yourself from anything that you have a personal relationship with, financial investment in. There's a list of things in that say what you cannot vote on. And I know I have no voting power, but I still do the same thing.
Sure.
A couple quick questions. Really, with some of the smaller counties, I've heard stories, and I guess the word would be complaint every now and then, where you're looking at building a new recreation complex, and the engineering firm comes in and they're doing the drawing. This is our vision. How is that kind of stuff paid for?
The actual concept, that's actually, we provide that money in our budget when we go to a SPLOST referendum.
And the concept though, do you have to bid that out?
We do. We do actually do an RFP for the
Okay.
concept.
And what I hear so many times, it's amazing how many times the people that actually did the drawing.
Does it work? Yep, we've
I
actually.
mean, if it's an open bid process, you would think maybe your price was cheaper on the drawing, but how does that actually translate into being cheaper on that? Unless, because I've received those calls more times than you would ever know. About what a coincidence, this engineering firm happens to get 80% of the county's work.
Right. We typically roll our concept and design, actual engineering design, into one process. So we want you to come in and tell us your ideas from the beginning, give us a price to develop the concept as well as the design. So we give you that opportunity for early on.
If I may continue, Madam Chair, there's an amount in which you have to go to the county commission chair to get approval of the county commission on your purchasing?
Yes, anything above 20,000 they
Okay.
can purchase.
Right. We also had a situation, and I'm going to mention the counties involved, but we also had a situation where, but if I put in two separate invoices at 12.5,
Right.
so you shake your head because you've seen the people game that system.
Absolutely.
What do y'all have in place to make sure that doesn't happen?
We have an ordinance in place that says you shall not do that, so we put that on ourselves.
And I love you. What happens is because they don't want the dirty laundry aired in the local newspaper and all this kind of stuff, they just call them in and say, let's not do that again. But the transparency that everybody says they have, you're still gaining the system of over 20,000
Right.
by having multiple receipts, and nobody's showing that in public.
Right, and it has been called by our auditor before. We had our landfill's closed, it's been closed since 2005, but we have that big pot of money that we are required to keep to maintain it. We had a store credit line open, and the guy overseeing it would go buy grass seed. He'd buy grass seed today. A day from now, he'd go buy grass seed. A week later, he'd go buy grass seed. And by the end of the month, that store credit was up to $25,000. He'd go up there and hand him his purchasing card and say, all right, clean me out for the week, for the month. And he did a $25,000
But
purchase.
since that would be a personnel matter, that would actually be discussed.
The auditors called it.
But it would be discussed behind closed doors and not necessarily the public.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When no, it was presented publicly. When the auditors called it, they came forward and said, here's your
But if it's a
problem.
personnel matter,
Oh, yeah.
isn't that one of the exemptions to?
You can't go into executive
You
session.
could go into executive session and the public would never know, not in your case.
Yes, sir, I understand.
But that could
Yes.
actually, and the public would never know while we're all saying transparency.
Gotcha.
Follow, just in Columbia County, do you have a local preference policy?
We do not.
And the reason why I bring that up, we love our fine folks up here, but in rural Georgia, you're gonna do a bid for the county for 2 Ford 150 trucks. And the argument's made, well, if Port Town, Atlanta is 2%, then we have to go with them. And there's people making the argument, no, those dollars should be spent locally, because all of us talk about the importance of SPLOST being the fairs, because that money's spent locally and raised locally and sold locally. Everybody uses that, but y'all don't have a local buying preference when you bid something like that out for vehicles.
We do not.
Okay, and finally, do you have a system in place on what you do with your surplus property when you buy or sell?
Yes, sir. So for the selling, we actually use Gov Deals. Before it can go to Gov Deals, commission must vote to declare it surplus. And that's over a certain value. If it's an old printer, less than $100, you're not going to get anything for it. That goes through. But if we're surplus on a vehicle,
Yes.
commission has to declare it surplus, and then you have to come back and sell it on Gov Deals. We have an agreement with Gov Deals. It's an auction. High bidder gets it.
Okay, and as far as you know, do all counties, are they forced to do that?
I believe so.
So if they had a $3,000 truck, they could, in theory, give it to the school.
And we do that. We do that a lot. But it
But
takes.
you didn't bid that?
No, sir, take that, right there, we go on appraised value. So we go to the tax assessor and say, what is the value of this truck? It's $2,500.
And again, I'm just talking big picture. So if I, as a consumer, it's just a regular taxpayer, wanted to give you $3,200 for it, you couldn't take more money to put it into the coffers
Not if it was gonna go to another government body
for less money.
for less money, correct? If we thought we could get $3,200 for
And the only reason I bring that up, I get citizens all the time saying, hey, I wanted to buy that Jeep.
Right.
It's almost like there's inside baseball going on in the public, never happens, but it is tax dollars.
Right, so the city of Harlem, they when we get our old patrol cruisers, we'd love to have that charger. It's got 100,000 miles, you're about to replace it, we'll give you $2,500 for it. We see that as a benefit to the taxpayers. We just saved Harlan taxpayers money, who are also Columbia County taxpayers.
Poor side of the county.
Right.
Excuse me. I know we're talking, I forgot, Columbia County has what major city?
We don't have a major city. We're 90% unincorporated.
You
We're
never
just
did.
outside of Augusta.
Okay, so somewhat different than the metro
Absolutely.
Right.
counties completely.
A little similar to DeKalb in the way that DeKalb doesn't have a city of Atlanta. Columbia County is similar. It has two small cities, but it only makes up 15% of the population. But there's no major city there.
But we have major cities.
Yeah, but he's saying not DeKalb yet, though.
What?
Not compared to Atlanta, you know. I mean, you got cities that are of 100,000 people in a county of 1 million people almost. So
We
it's,
don't have a million.
what, 9?
750.
750. So 20% of the county.
And what percent is incorporated?
In DeKalb,
Yeah.
50, I'm just rough guess.
Okay, do you know? I don't. I mean, I know it's 40 to 50%.
Sure.
I just wanted it. It just seems that you deal with the smaller cities and the smaller counties in terms of surplus and selling things and all. Then we have a totally, are we going mainly through the government auctions with DeKalb?
We are looking for best practices and ways to be transparent. And I mean, obviously, this committee looks at all kind of government structures and how everybody's doing things differently and who can do what best, and maybe, you know, making recommendations on, you know, what other counties could emulate that other counties do well.
And again, we're not looking for one size fits all because, okay, great. Yeah, it's just sort of information sharing of how it's done in different areas and different counties.
Hence the study committee. Hence the study committee, yes. And
Yes,
I'm
that's-
sorry, I didn't announce that you were here. So Representative Michelle Hinson, one of my DeKalb colleagues, is here. We've only got 30 more minutes for this room, so I think we are done with you. But thank you so much
Madam
for
Chair,
your
I just want for the
presentation.
record that and again, one size doesn't fit all. But there is a concern out there with, if something happens in a P car or something happens that happens in executive session, the public doesn't always know. I want to bring that up to the committee. And the other one is that there's a lot of citizens feel like they ought to have a fair shot at surplus. Goods as well, instead of inside baseball, I'll trade you my truck for your bus.
Makes sense.
Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Ted Burgess, the purchasing director from Fayette County. The reason we chose Fayette and Columbia counties are because they have been outstanding in the process of procurement and transparency and best practices, et cetera. So that's kind of why we're hearing from them today, just like we heard from Gwinnett and Douglas County last time, because they are exceptional in their water services. So, you ready?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yes, as was said, my name is Ted Burgess. I'm the Director of Purchasing for Fayette County. And first, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And for the next few minutes, we're going to look at Fayette County's purchasing function, where it's been and where it's going. First, I'll provide a little background information so I can set the stage, and then I want to share with you some of our transparency processes, our best practices, and some of our future direction. Okay, the purchasing function is governed on several levels. The Georgia Code provides guidance for competitively obtained contracts for public works construction, roads and bridges, and some other projects. Our county ordinances, policies, and procedures establish our rules for other procurements and who has what level of authority to approve the purchases and award the contracts. Then, of course, the court decisions provide binding opinions that interpret the laws that we're following. And lastly, if a federal agency is giving us $1 of money, then their rules take precedence over everything else. Okay, very briefly, Georgia Code covers public works construction, as I said, roads and bridges, the statewide DOAS county county contract purchases, and E-Verify and Open Records Act. For the federal procurement requirements that I mentioned, they have what they call the Uniform Requirements for Federal Awards, which governs what we do no matter what federal grant we have. It tells us that we have to do that. And now at the state level, basically it says, okay, state procurement agencies, follow your own rules and we're good. At the county level, it gives us some pretty detailed rules to follow. Then, of course, the court decisions, as I said, they provide the interpretation of the law. And a couple of examples there. Fault versus, that should be Twiggs County. The state Supreme Court ruled that a county can enter into a contract that establishes unit prices, but doesn't specifically identify which things projects will be done, such as road construction, how much per mile, or that kind of thing. Then in Lester Witt and Company versus Raven County, one of the findings of the state Supreme Court was that an oral agreement is unenforceable even though it's embodied in a resolution and entered into the minutes of a board meeting. So, all right, types of procurements, to kind of reiterate some of what you just heard, we have what we call open market purchases and then formal competitive procurements. And again, like Columbia County, we use a P card and we use purchase orders and requests for quotes. The P card, we have a spending limit of $500 per transaction, and we anticipating the question from a while ago. We also limit the number of people who can have a P card. That's decided by each department head. They decide who can have a P card, and it has to be approved by our CFO. In the formal competitive procurements, again, we have two types. We have the ones that are solicited by the county, which is, as you know, is the invitations to bid and the request for proposals. And then those solicited by other entities are, again, the DOS statewide contracts and the cooperative agreements, which we had a little bit of discussion on. Okay, just very briefly here, try not to get in the weeds, but the difference between an open market purchase and a formal competitive, I think we heard Columbia County has a $20,000 threshold. Fayette County, we've got a little bit higher. We've got a $200,000 threshold, and this was something that was implemented a few years ago with our new county administrator. But again, an informal purchase does not have to be advertised, but formal does. You don't have a bid opening with an informal procurement, but you do with the formal. And then again, the county administrator can award any purchase under $200,000, although he doesn't always. If something is very visible, if it's something that has a lot of public interest or something like that, we will still take it to the board, even though it's under the $200,000. Okay. All right, this one, we mentioned cooperative agreements. All right, the difference in us using a DOS statewide contract and a cooperative alliance, both are authorized. We're authorized in Georgia code to use both of them. The DOS contracts, we know they have followed the state's formal bid process. If we use a cooperative alliance, it's up to the county to look and make sure that they have gone through a proper formal seal bid process, and also that they've complied with everything they need to, and that they have required language, terms and conditions, and that kind of thing in it. Okay, now to transparency. One of the more important tools that we have to assure transparency is to widely advertise our business opportunities. So we do more, I think, more than many of the entities that I'm aware of to do this. we keep an internet-based vendor list that businesses can register on, and they put their email addresses on there, and every time we need something that a particular vendor has registered on, we email them the opportunity. Then we have the Georgia Procurement Registry, which I'm sure you know this past year, House Bill 489 said that any formal bid or RFP over $10,000 that you do has to use that. We've been using that for years, so and we think it's great. Then we advertise on a county website, on a website called the Georgia Local Government Access Marketplace, and that's a county-city combined initiative. We advertise in our local newspaper, and we advertise through the Greater Georgia Black Chamber of Commerce and through cable TV.
Madam Chair? It says opportunities. Do you do that on do you have to use every one of those, or do you get to pick and choose?
It is our decision. We could pick and choose except the Georgia Procurement Registry over 10,000. That's a legal requirement now. But other than that, we could pick and choose. But for various reasons, anytime we've got a formal sealed bid, invitation to bid, or RFP, we do every single one.
So it's in your local code that you have to do every one if you're bidding at that level?
It's not in our local code, our local ordinances. It's our practice. Yeah, so we don't have to use all of these. We have to use the local newspaper and the Georgia Procurement Registry.
And just real quick, why would you use, for example, the Greater Georgia Black Chamber of Commerce and not the Chamber of Commerce in addition to, or your own local Chamber of Commerce?
Okay, good question. No, we hadn't previously, until about 2 years ago, used any Chamber of Commerce, and basically, the way we use them, we email their executive director, and their executive director blasts it out to their
Who's the executive director?
a lady named
Who's? The Georgia Chamber?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, the Black Chamber.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good question. We had not used either, any of the chambers or anything. The executive director of the Black Chamber came to my office one day and said, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay, come in. And she said, some of my people. I was asking some of my people why they don't, do they get business from the county? And they said, well, no. And she said, well, why not? They said, well, we don't bother to answer we just don't think it's worth our time. So I said, wait a minute, I don't understand that. That concerns me. And as we talked,
But my concern is that I wouldn't want exclusion to be for anybody.
oh no, we definitely don't
I
want
would
to
think the
exclude.
Georgia Chamber should be there too, because you want the lowest bid. Isn't that the goal?
Oh, absolutely, and that's
I
what
would
we're
want my local chamber to know.
Yeah, okay, we will, yes, good point. Okay. Okay, and other ways we're transparent. All right, holding bids and proposals, openings that are open to the public on a scheduled date and time is very helpful. And our experience has been that we do have, especially on our larger value bid openings, we have people attending. But also when to award a contract, the ones that are awarded by the Board of Commissioners, we have to publish them. We have to have them on the agenda 2 weeks before a meeting. There's a meeting held between the county administrator and the board chair about a week and a half before, and then 1 week before is made public. So the public all knows 1 week before what's going to be on the agenda, and they have in front of them everything, what the solicitation was, how we advertised it, how many people responded, the tally sheet that shows what the prices were that were bid, and everything about it. So we try to be very transparent there. Then the other topic, open records request, in an effort to do that, to respond to that the best we could and be responsible and accountable, we have put a very simple request form on our website person just clicks on it. It asks their name, their address, and a little box about briefly what they want to talk about or what they want to ask about, and we turn those around as promptly as we can. Okay, some of our best practices. State laws and federal rules that we said regulate the procurement and contracting processes, and that's a good thing because it provides vendor access to business opportunities, equitable treatment for the vendors, fair decisions, and good contract and business practices. And within that framework, Fayette County has also focused on ways to improve our outcomes. We're mindful that a county purchasing function exists to support the county's efforts in achieving the best results. For example, by conducting an analysis of the work that the purchasing department did in 2012, we found that the county was applying the least amount of administrative effort on the largest dollar transactions. We realized that we were spending 64% of our time on the smallest formal competitive procurements and 85% of our time on the lowest value purchase orders. So what we did in the spring of 2013, we updated our purchasing policies and procedures. As you'll see, our P cards, we increased the authorization at that time from $100 to $500. We allowed all the departments to make their own purchases up to $5,000, and my authority was increased from $20,000 to $50,000. And as I mentioned before, the county administrator's authority was increased from $20,000 to $200,000. And our formal procurements, as was stated before, public works construction by state law has a $100,000 threshold, but other procurements have a $200,000 threshold. And then, what this did was allow us to dramatically increase the amount of time we're spending on our higher dollar, more complex transactions. And then we reduced the number of our purchase orders from 1,202 the year before that to about 650 in the first full year of implementation of this. And so that let us spend our time on almost 50% of the higher value transactions that 50% more time than we would have the year before. Okay, all right, our identified needs. The Governmental Procurement Association of Georgia is an association that includes the county and city governments, boards of education, college, universities, local entities, and others, the procurement professionals. And so this past spring, I worked with them to conduct a survey of the professionals, and the people that responded to that told us that they wanted they felt a need for a consistent interpretation of the law's intent and meaning among the local governments, Georgia-wide best practices, legal definitions of words and terms in Georgia code, legislation compliance training, and access to information on court decisions. Okay, so for almost a year now, I've been working with GPAG, and we've been working on a number of initiatives to improve the purchasing function. One thing, earlier this year, we formed a legislative review team, which I am currently heading. And we reached out to ACCG, the Georgia Municipal Association, and the Georgia School Board Association to form a partnership in supporting them in the legislative process. So what we plan to do in the upcoming session is when ACCG or any of the others have a piece of proposed legislation that impacts us, they plan to share it with us and get our input on it. And this will. We also plan to. We plan to do things like offer suggestions for language that's clear and unambiguous to us. And an example of that might be the House Bill 489 that was passed last year. If you remember that, it said that. In fact, it's the one on the Georgia Procurement Registry. It said that it said any bid or proposal over $10,000 that we must use the Georgia Procurement Registry. The cities, the counties, their attorneys and all, there was a lot of discussion about what that meant. Bid and proposal. Did that mean any transaction over $10,000? Did that mean a formal invitation to bid? And all that. And now I think they're coming to a consensus now, but at first there was a lot of discussion about it. Well, I think it means this. Well, I think it means this.
I would think it means anything over $10,000.
Okay, good point.
We ain't worried about 7,000. That's why we put it in there.
Yes. Okay. That was my prepared presentation. I'll be glad to answer questions.
I have a couple questions specifically about the P card authorization. I mean, you just said that we went from 100 or y'all went from 100 to 500 and dollars for their authorization, and you have certain people who determine who gets to use. I guess each department head gets to determine who gets to have a P card. How often are y'all overseeing these, making sure they're not getting carried away? I mean, $500 seems kind of high.
Yes.
So I mean, what are y'all doing to make sure that people are not abusing these?
Sure. Okay. And first, let me say that the P card function falls under our finance department, not purchasing this time. But having said that, the finance department keeps a very tight rein. They not only do they get the transactions from the store from the credit card out, but also if I use the P card, I have to turn in a report and invoices and all that too, which they match up. And they do once a month. They look at every single thing on there, and the CFO actually reviews it. And she's pretty tight with it. If she sees anything that she needs to question, she questions the department heads, and there are some pretty tight reins there. If a person abuses theirs one time, they can lose it.
Do they lose their job?
They can lose it.
And now I'd have to look to cost to be sure, but the best I recall, it would depend on the on the nature of the abuse.
Real quick, when did y'all make the decision to give a tenfold increase from 20,000 to 200,000?
In 2013.
How did you come up with that figure?
Our new county administrator came in and he had some good ideas. And
So that was part of the negotiation to get him to come be the new administrator?
I don't know if it was part of the new. It may have been part of the negotiation, but I know.
I mean, we've seen those kind of movies before too. And do the taxpayers know that he's going to get that free reign since he's untested coming in?
I honestly wasn't privy to that.
Yeah, okay.
But,
So,
may
I have a quick question. So for anything under $200,000, y'all don't require any sort of formal bid?
all right. We're not required to do a formal bid, but that's a good point. There are a good many procurement transactions that we do that we feel a need to do a formal one, so we do them anyway.
So what's the threshold? Like, how do y'all determine, this is $50,000, but we think the public really needs to be involved in this. This is $200,000, but we think that we can just send that one through. Like, how do y'all make that determination?
Okay, part of it depends on the complexity, on the public interest, on so many things we're doing now have software in them, or annual support agreements and all these. The complex ones we tend to go to a much lower dollar value. But if it's something $100,000 worth of gravel, then that may not.
And do y'all, I know that formal bidding isn't required, but would you, for example, we were talking about local preference earlier, would y'all call, your local gravel dealers, or would y'all call around the state, or would you call to Alabama and say, how do I know I'm getting the best price, or do y'all just go, it's under $200,000, seems pretty reasonable, cut the check?
Oh, no. In fact, anything over $5,000, we'll do a request for quotes, and that's basically the same thing as an invitation to bid, except you don't have to advertise on those places, and you don't have to do a formal announced bid opening. But having said that, no, we don't have a local preference policy. That has been debated. I know several times in this past year with our commissioners and all, but basically, the debate stems between local business development on the one hand and getting the best price of taxpayers on the other hand, and that has been.
This will be my last question, Madam Chair. Please understand, this isn't about specifically your situation. This is
Sure.
about stories we hear, this and that.
Sure.
Everybody wants the local control.
Sure.
I want it. However, when you do the transparency and advertise business opportunities, I said, do you have to do that? Your answer was no.
The local preference, that's correct.
No, on any
Oh,
of them.
I'm sorry.
When I asked you the question earlier, and this isn't just about you, do you have to use the email to vendor list, Georgia
Oh,
procurement
I
resident?
see.
You don't have to use all of them.
That's correct.
That's correct. And since I don't have to use all of them, I could use just one of them. Could, not you, right? There's
One
nothing
could.
that would prohibit
One
that.
could.
And if I chose to do it under $200,000, I could. So the gravel company, the next county over on 100,000, I don't have to. I could just order straight from him, right? And we're just wondering when we hear those stories, because we see it. You get some mayor goes and or some county commission chairman goes and asphalts or driveway, I think was the one we saw a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And then we always get, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
And I get that,
Yeah.
the bad actors, because everybody's got bad actors except in the House.
Right.
But on the other hand, when you go from 20,000 to 200,000, and you don't necessarily, like you said, even have to do one of these things.
No, you have to.
Well, you have to do at least one, is what. I said you have to do all these, and
That's right. You don't have to do all of them. You have to do some of them.
I asked you a minute ago, can you do just one, and your answer was yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could do just one. right?
That's correct. You could do just.
And someone could get a contract for $150,000 and nobody else would know.
Well, except. Yeah, good point. But no, first, and something I didn't
That
mention.
could happen though, right?
No, because I'm fixing to explain. Anything over $50,000, although it doesn't follow this, any transaction over $50,000, I still write up all the things I mentioned before, how many bids, the prices, and all this, as well as a contractor performance evaluation that if they've done work before for us. I put all this together and it's presented to the board at the next board meeting. So even though the county administrator can sign a $50,000 contract, the board is made aware of it, and I am one of the people who wouldn't be here before if I'd ever done that.
I'm confused now, but we'll fix that later. I just was under the impression you don't have to do all of this to your testimony.
Well,
You do one, and the county administrator in this situation can do up to $200,000.
yes, he can.
So if I gave the gravel for $150,000, I may have to turn in a receipt later, obviously, or something, but there's something that keeps that system of checks and balances in place beforehand.
No, we can't. We would not allow, say, on the departments, as we said, are limited to a $5,000 purchase.
Right, but the county administrator is,
Okay, yeah.
right?
Right, but again, while he can approve an $80,000 purchase, he has to provide that information to the board at the next board meeting, introduce
after.
the minutes.
Well, and
Yeah,
presumably
afterwards.
he wouldn't be able to, or he or she, I'm not sure what you'll have, but that person wouldn't be able to just go, I think that such and such a road needs $150,000 worth of gravel. Like, that would have to work its way up,
Right.
through staff.
No, I'm just trying to get a specific clarification.
Mhm.
And I don't want to make this exclusive, but we've seen this movie before. I'm just trying to get what in law, what keeps someone, if the county administrator can spend $200,000 and follow just one of these, what prohibits that from happening?
Okay, and,
Not after the fact. Not that I gotta turn it in after the fact. Well, if we got a bad actor, especially someone we just hired, what keeps them from going and spending $175,000 on something and only doing it through one notification?
He loses his job.
Pardon me?
He loses his job.
We don't know that. There's nothing
But
that.
once the CFO looks at it, because he said they had tight.
It could be
reins.
perfectly legitimate. I'm just sitting there, they're going, there's nothing that keeps that from happening. It could be 160. Since he's so new, he didn't necessarily know all the vendors. Just hypothetically.
So I guess they have to deal with it, the county commission.
Yeah, after the
Sounds
fact.
like an independent. All right, well, thank you for joining us this morning and for driving up from Fayette. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have questions? I'm sorry.
I think my only question here, there was quite a jump on some of your fees, as we've said, what was previous and the new threshold. How long ago had the old ones been set?
all I can say is way before my time. I was new in the county at that time, and they were all I can say. They were well entrenched. I don't know how.
So what you had is things that really were older, and this was bringing it up to more current and realistic purchasing that we have today in terms of the amounts.
Well, I do want to be careful and say that it wasn't updated. The $200,000 threshold is higher than most.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah, Columbia was 220.
Yeah.
Except for that public works.
Right.
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 And there's a part of me that goes, just, Madam Chair, there's a part of me that goes, I get if you tie it to the rate of inflation over where it's got to be reviewed or sunset, just like we did. It shouldn't stay at 20,000, under like paying a legislator 17,000 forever.
It's already 7.
But, I know, that was the judge. So I get that, but with all due respect, everybody talks transparency. There's a lot of folks out there, if you went from 20,000 to 200,000 in one fell swoop, that ain't gonna pass the Joe Q citizen smell test. Now, if you got it buried in the legal section so they never did, that looks like a huge jump to someone.
Right.
It does, especially if you do because someone was just hired.
And I can understand that. What I'd like to add to that is that again, this allowed us to quit spending our time. We have a small purchasing department, and this allowed us to quit spending as much time on a $600 purchase as we did on a $60,000 purchase. And so there's always trade-offs, yes, but things again, like I said, things are getting so complex, and the counties are going out. I think there's a value to us spending more time on making sure that a high dollar contract is done well, and and protects the public sector and gets the citizens what they need. So it is a trade-off.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, we are running up against a deadline, but apparently we can stay in this room a couple more minutes. So we would like to welcome Al Hodge, the President and CEO of the Rome Floyd Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for the opportunity to come and share about Rome and Floyd County, Georgia. And it's my honor to thank all for your servant leadership. Please know that is appreciated throughout the state. We have prepared some information. Part of this is a frame of reference opportunity with our location in Northwest Georgia, as well as our population of knocking on the door of 100,000 folks. Our unemployment rate right now is 4.2%, and we are a community of education, healthcare, and manufacturing. We very proudly, for instance, are the home of the Harmony Clinic, which is the state's largest private multi-specialty clinic, as well as both public and private colleges, 2 school systems, and Darlington School, an international boarding school that has been with us for over 100 years. Major employers are a good mix of education, manufacturing, healthcare, and our manufacturers include the traditional food processing, some floor covering, when we shifted from floor covering and textiles to the future, it was a lot of targeting for automotive sector. And more recently, we are tying in, of course, to the digital realm. We have a lot of international companies and a lot of flags fly over our community. And to get to the point, I think, of what you're looking for, we use the Unified Economic Development Model with the city and county, both with our constitutional authority, which is the Rome-Floyd Development Authority, and our statutory authority, which is the Development Authority of Floyd County. The composition of the Rome-Floyd, the constitutional authority, is the mayor, the county commission chair, the volunteer chair of the board of the chamber, the chair of our existing industries association. Those are the 4 by statute, and then they select the other 3, which are rotating, of course, in their memberships on that. We work on marketing to generate inquiries, leads, requests for information, visits, and ultimately, of course, good decisions. We do that in concert with the city and county. The chamber does the marketing, again, in concert with the city, county, and the development authorities. And the Floyd County government, specifically, this is, I think, your specific interest. Project interest, property, infrastructure, and incentives are all controlled if it is in the county, and of course, even if it's in the city, the county has jurisdiction as well, for all of the above. For instance, they have veto power over any of the projects or prospects that would bring them. And on the other hand, they obviously have the opportunity to negotiate and work together to secure business.
So they'll veto prospects as well?
Yes.
Interesting.
And
On the development authority, is there a school board member on that?
no, sir. But we work very closely with the school systems as well.
This is about Floyd. Several years ago, I was on a study committee, and a lot of these economic development authorities were granting various tax.
Right.
And the school board has said, they're going, look, we get 55% of the property tax here, and you're cutting a deal without even consulting us on how it affects us.
Yes, sir. We do consult with them, and depending upon the transaction, they approve it. For instance, we recruited the Lowe's Regional Distribution Center, and the city of Rome, Floyd County, the Floyd County School System, School Board, and the Rome Floyd Health Authority, and Floyd County Health Authority all voted on their incentives package.
To make a pass a resolution in support.
Yes, sir. I mean, all of it was specifically approved. More often, we communicate with the school systems if in appropriate jurisdiction. Let me go back to, you raised a good question, Madam Chair, or at least a comment, and that is the veto. Typically, if it is an environmental question, then the city or county may say, thank you, but no thank you. If it is an incentives package that is not one that is realistic, where there would be a return on investment, the city or county may say, go as far as we can, which essentially would be a veto as well.
But they're in the negotiations from the beginning, right? I mean, they know what the incentives package would be, because they have to, okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Is your Chamber of Commerce and your Economic Development Authority, do they operate under one budget? Are they separate?
The chamber is one budget. The development authority has a separate budget. For instance, they collect the payments in lieu of taxes.
And on
That
the
would be
hotel
separate.
motel tax?
That's the convention and visitors bureau.
Yes.
And they're separate altogether. We work with them, but they're separate entities altogether.
Do they provide a percentage to the chamber or the Economic Development Authority? Who actually makes that decision?
They do
County?
not. Ultimately, the convention and visitors bureau is a city run function, and then they have a cooperative agreement with the county. And they keep the funds for marketing, operating.
I think that each entity almost throughout the state does that a little differently. And so some of us as legislators get drug into those kind of messes, would be putting it nicely. And I didn't know if you thought, what you thought the best practice was, if you could say that.
again, we work very closely with them, and part of that is an understanding, we don't have a memorandum of understanding, but an understanding of what we do at the Chamber of what the Convention and Visitors Bureau does. An example of that, Convention and Visitors Bureau folks are the ones that market the film industry to run. When it comes to infrastructure and the digital curriculum and so forth, then that's the Chamber helps with that on the perspective.
And a lot of places don't have a convention visitors bureau.
Yes, sir. So it's a cooperative relationship, always under review, but a cooperative relationship. You see there that's one of our industrial parks, the one with all the good Caterpillar equipment on it. That is a joint development authority owned park, and at the same time, Floyd County controls it with infrastructure and with ultimate control over the budget, the grading, and so forth related to that. Part of the benefit, one of the many benefits, is the synergy that we have using this model. Therefore, when the county is interested in legislation, we may include that. In fact, if it is relevant to economic and community development, we'll include that in our priorities for the chamber through our governmental affairs division. Similarly, with the federal government, for instance, each year we go together with what we call the Washington, D.C. Issues and Opportunities Conference. We jointly build that priority list, and therefore, for the airport, which should be Russell Regional Airport, we lobby together related to that. And we have a study that Market Street Services independently did with the city, county, and chamber support. And they talked about the underutilized asset of that fixed asset, that transportation amenity. And therefore, we go together to the FAA to lobby for that. The FAA professional staff, year in and year out, are very impressed because a lot of communities are not together. They may have the city one day, and virtually that afternoon or the next day, they have the county coming in and saying, don't do this, or other entities. So all of this is a fringe benefit of working together. Similarly, we work on startups, expansions, recruitment, and again, all of that in conjunction with the city and the county. And some of the results, this is a Canadian company, small business, first Canadian flag that's flying over the community, that's in our Floyd County Industrial Park. And the origin of that actually was 10 years before they came. We worked with a consultant who was very impressed with the community, with the workforce. Thank you all for your support. QBE, Technical College System, University System, and so forth. All that pays dividends, and one of the dividends of that was with Carlson Group coming in.
How long have you been there?
I've been in Rome for 21
It
years.
seems like I remember, and I can't give you the timeline, that there was a national news stories on one of the major networks about how Rome and Floyd County had turned around.
Yes, sir.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, sir. NBC News.
NBC News. I want to say that they talked about even getting the firm from Canada.
Well, what they were impressed with.
Now, that's a 10-year-old memory or so.
Yes, sir. I'm impressed. Thank you. Can we get you? We do have you on tape.
Yeah, if you say something, I'll remember that later, so here.
That one was about the Italian company.
Okay.
A Pirelli, which is the high-performance tire manufacturer, came in with a roboticized process to make tires. And it is the world's most efficient and most environmentally responsible tire manufacturer. And we share the corporate headquarters with New York and so forth, but Rome is designated as their North American headquarters. They also are very proud of their sustainability model for environmental benefits. They're the lead tire manufacturer in the world for sustainability. Part of what they were impressed with is that a community of our size that went through
Is
the
it a
Great
downturn
Depression.
because of the carpet or there's something in that part of
Yes,
and
sir.
how you turn it around?
Yes,
So-
sir. That's exactly right. Several of our major manufacturers closed. We lost about 3,000 jobs in a rather short period of time. And we had the Market Street study, which we call Rome Floyd 2020. We're now on our third iteration of that, each time we do it, we move the milestone 20 years, then we take a look at what we need to do in the next 5 years, and laser light focus every year on that. And so it's working. They were impressed that A, we had a study, B, a lot of communities do studies, but they don't implement, and they were very, very impressed. We spent a lot of time with them prior to them coming. In other words, we earned our way. And then with Forbes magazine, they did a nice print of it as well. They were especially impressed with the number of international companies that we were able to recruit. Since then, we've recruited others.
One quick follow-up.
Yes, sir.
I'm a member of the Speakers Rural Economic Development Council, and one of the things that we're all talking about, which you almost can't say, is getting that regional cooperation and getting the different government entities on the same page.
Yes, sir.
And your reputation, Colquitt County's reputation, is a handful that have an outstanding reputation. And there's a part of me that goes, we'd like to know what the heck you're doing and what do you see as the problem of why we can't get everybody to think that way. Is it just a matter of, we've all slept it off as just good old generic turf wars? Is it as simple as that much time?
Well, and it's daily communications and so forth, and I'll take responsibility of not being perfect at that.
Right.
But yes, sir, it is very important to have everybody on the same wavelength. The city commissioners, the county commissioners, when we do our briefings in Atlanta, for instance, we invite both the city and county to participate with us. Definitely, as we are putting together the priorities for the state General Assembly, that we come and ask you for your support, and for the federal guidelines as I mentioned before, it's all together. And by statute, there's not necessarily the veto power, but by practice, we absolutely do that. Control for incentives, infrastructure, and anything else. Like I said, the veto power rests with the city and the county, even though it's a constitutional authority. In that respect, it's there. I repeat, it is constantly under review, and that's no exception right now. Another company that we're very proud that is in our community is Balta, and they also, it's a Belgian-based company, they also have designated Floyd County as their North American headquarters. We have several examples of that. Another one is South Korea. Branson Tractor Company is a South Korean company that is headquartered. Now, we're very proud of the fact that OTR Will Engineering, their worldwide headquarters is in Rome. There are corporate headquarters such as Southeastern Mills, which is a multi-generational company that also owns, by the way, Louisiana hot sauce brand, better than bouillon. You've eaten their food and have enjoyed it. You just may not know that you're enjoying some Southeastern Mills food and beverages that they've put together. We're very happy that we are able to come and share our story today, and I invite you to
So does the county have a specific economic development person that you all work with in particular?
We work primarily with the county manager, Jamie McCord, and with Gary Burkhalter, who is the assistant manager. Now, similarly with the city, Sandy Ridge, and with Patrick Edson. Beyond that, if it's water, we go to the water director, wastewater, and so forth.
So are y'all typically though in charge of recruiting companies, and then you get the county commission involved at whatever level is necessary?
Yes.
And then you say, let's work together on this, and then you all kind of go at it as a team, or do you all take the lead and say,
Depends on the
we'll come back to
circumstances.
you when, okay.
Right. Typically, when what we consider in the baseball example, when the company is coming from second to third, or from third base to home, we engage what we call our economic development leadership team. On a day-to-day basis, it's the county manager, the city manager, chamber staff, and whoever else on the infrastructure side related to that. They, of course, check with their respective mayor, chair, and others in the elected capacity as the project moves forward. When it gets to that point, we broaden it, and the chair of the county commission, the mayor, and the two development authority chairs sit and work through prospects and anticipate infrastructure needs and opportunities.
And when you all get together a package, then someone, such as yourself or someone else from the chamber, may come to a county commission meeting, present it, and then that would be kind of the public hearing, and then the county commission would vote on it at that point?
The typical process is one that the Rome Floyd Development Authority is the one that we would come before. And that's comprised of the chair of the county commission, mayor, and others. Depending on the circumstances of what may be included in the package, and I've used Lowe's Regional Distribution Center as an example, virtually every, not every, but almost every public entity that could have taken the vote. And the Rome Floyd Development Authority and the Development Authority of Floyd County, which we also go before, all of those meetings are in public as well, and covered by the meeting hours.
Does it have to be a unanimous vote, or is it 50+1?
It does not have to be unanimous, but the practice has been unanimous.
Questions? I'm gonna ask questions along the way, so. All right, well, I appreciate your presentation today. I appreciate you setting a great example for cooperation and communication. I think communication is very, very important on all levels of government. So thank you again for being here and for driving all the way in. I know it was an early morning for you as well.
Happy to do it, and again, I repeat, if, among other things I could improve is the communications on the basis of elected officials. So we're working on that. So,
Absolutely.
well, thank you very much. Appreciate your attention, and I repeat, your servant leadership and your ably represented as well on professional staff. Thank you.
I agree with that. All right, we were going to have Michael Hughes come speak to us today, but we found out early this morning that his father passed. So I want you all to keep him in your thoughts and prayers. Our next meeting is on November 15th, where we will have, I believe it'll be open to public comment, and we will make some recommendations or the rough draft of the report, and then the following meeting after that is when the committee will actually make its recommendations. I don't think the date for that last meeting has been set yet. So November 15th, this one will actually be at the Capitol, and I'm not sure about the time yet. So my assistant, Blake, will send out an agenda and time and date for that. Otherwise, thank you all for joining us this morning, and meeting adjourned.